All right, welcome back again. So we kind of divided this task into there's the Endpoints API backend stuff. It's done. It was really nice that we were able to test it with that API Explorer. So we know we've kind of got that wrapped up. Next, moving forwards, we're going to try to make a client app. Nice thing about Endpoints is, of course, you can make iOS or Android clients as well. This class is all about the web, so we're going to make a web client. But the cool thing is that they all use the exact same backend, and they can all work with it in the same way, just like depending on their platform. So it's a really neat system. So what we're going to do is we're going to, of course, going to make a web client. So to get started, what we want to do is we want to copy our template.html file. So right now it's called base page. So let's just go ahead and copy that guy. And we're going to dump it into the static folder. I'm going to rename it as well. So instead of base page, I'm going to call it MQ underscore endpoints. I'm also going to make some JavaScript that's specific for this page, and I'm going to use the same trick. So I'm going to take the old one, which was called main.js, and I'm going to make a copy of it, and I'm going to call it MQ underscore endpoints as well. So that's the JavaScript that I'm going to use for this one. It started off just as a copy of what the old JavaScript was, so it's going to need a lot of modifications. And then I've also got this HTML file, which currently has a bunch of Jinja in it as well. Let's see what that Jinja renders like without using actual Jinja, right? So you can go to that page by typing localhost 8080 /static /mq endpoints.html. It's a static page. It'll serve just fine at that location. Eventually, we will take over the main website, but for now, it's going to work out nice to have it be separate. Some things you notice. First off, when you're not, using Jinja expansion, but you're still using Jinja in your HTML, it doesn't look very good, right? And that's kind of expected. So there's going to be some changes that we need to make there. Another thing I want to do is I don't want to get confused. So I'm going to have two tabs open here. One is to localhost 8080, and then the other is to my static page. And just to make sure I don't get confused at all, I'm going to actually write movie quotes endpoints on this one, in big bold letters. And so I'm going to do it. So here's my MQ endpoints. I'm just going to write the word endpoints on the title. And then I'm also going to write it down in that nav header. So here's the brand, so movie quotes endpoints. And then while I'm at it, this is more optional. I'll make the other one say forms plus Jinja. So this is, I opened up my old one, which is base page. And so now it'll be really easy to make sure I don't get these two guys confused. So if I refresh this one, it says movie quotes endpoints. And if I go into my other tab here, which is just localhost 8080, it says movie quotes form plus Jinja. It's also kind of written up here in the tab as well. All right, the next thing we want to do is we want to start kind of going through this guy and taking out the pieces that are specific to forms and Jinja, right? So I think in the slides, it kind of goes through one piece at a time. It's like, oh, here's the stuff you need to change for create, and they do it. And then here's the stuff you need to change for read, and then they do it. Just for fun, I want to go through the entire HTML file just from top to bottom and just kind of strip out the Jinja form stuff and start putting in some endpoint stuff. I'll probably make some mistakes by doing it this way, but I think it's kind of more fun. So just kind of starting at the top. So obviously all the boilerplate stuff, the doc types, the meta types, none of that changes. The CSS, we're still going to use the same CSS. If you wanted to get rid of some comments, you probably could condense things a little bit. jQuery and Bootstrap, we're still using jQuery and Bootstrap. We're just adding some few things to it. Our custom JS, we're going to actually use a different file. So instead of main, we're going to use MQ endpoints. Cool. And so once we actually make them different, it'll use the right one. Coming down through here for some other things, the nav bar didn't really change at all. We added the word endpoints. Nothing big there. The table is where we start to actually see some real differences. So the first thing that I noticed that's going to need to change here is that there's some Jinja, right? we're not going to be using Jinja, so you can just kill that for statement. And then there's also like an N4 that goes with it down here. Just kill those two guys. Instead, what we're going to be doing is we're going to be making this table row is going to be like a template for us, right? So I'm just going to call this movie quote template. The one scary thing about just typing willy-nilly like this is that I might make a slight change from the slides, but as long as if you pick a name like this, it's fine to name it whatever you want, as long as your JavaScript matches, right? And I'm going to give this thing a class called movie quote. And then what I'm going to do is you can see that there's some more Ginger here. I'm going to say like template quote, and then I'm going to also say like template movie. I'm writing these in here because I know that I should replace these before anybody ever sees them. So I'm just kind of putting in a placeholder there, which should hopefully never be seen. And we're also going to need a class on here because we're going to need to reference this field and change it, right? So I'm just going to put a class on both of these just so that they're easier to reference in our JavaScript. Next thing we've got is we've got those edit buttons. So we've got a delete button and we've also got an edit button. I like those. I like what they're doing. They launch a modal, which is great. That's still fine. They have a class on here, so it's edit movie quote, and then this one's delete movie quote. That's great. We're going to need to reference them. But here you can see that there's a bunch of Jinja. Let's talk about what this did and how it's going to be different this time. What this did is it added some hidden divs inside the button to kind of keep the metadata. We're going to do it a little differently this time. And so what we're going to do is we're actually just going to delete those 3 hidden divs. And what we're going to do is we're going to use a data attribute. That's actually something we probably should have done in the forms.jinja version 2, but we didn't. But here we're going to do it right. So go ahead and delete those. Very similar with the delete button. He's also got one of these hidden things that has Jinja. Go ahead and delete that one as well. So what that's going to do is that's going to get our table to look a lot better. Let's go look at our table. And so now here's what it looked like before. As soon as I hit refresh, you can see it says template quote and template movie. I don't want the template to show up by default, so I'm actually going to change its class to be class hidden. So once you make it class hidden, it's going to not show up, but that's expected, right? So it should look like there's no quotes. We'll copy that template whenever we need to actually like put quotes on the page once we get them. Cool. So that step is kind of done. You could also clean up, and you could probably reformat some of this stuff. It looks like some of it got shifted over in weird ways. I'm not too worried about it. I'm not gonna kill myself trying to get it just perfect. But you can see those are some of the things that we changed. Let's go ahead and keep cruising. I kind of enjoy this like modifications to the HTML. So let's just go ahead and keep cruising a little bit. So next up are the modals. So the modals, there's an insert quote modal, and then farther down there's a delete quote modal. We're going to go in and we're going to start making some changes to these guys as well. So first thing you'll notice is that they've got an ID on the modal. That's fine, that's good. They've got some screen reader things, which admittedly I'm not really doing much with, but I don't mind having them on there. They don't hurt me any. Haven't really done any testing with screen readers, so I'm just hoping that all works. The title says add a movie quote. Just like before, we're going to swap this out to say add a movie quote or edit a movie quote. It's already got a class on it though, so it'll be easy to reference in our JavaScript. The next thing that's different is that there's a form, right? So forms are interesting. So we definitely don't want to send any forms to the back end. So there's an action and there's a method on here. If you delete those two things, nothing's going to get sent, right? So we're kind of like, I don't want to use the word neutering the form, but we're making the form have no real power to do anything. The only reason we leave the form is for CSS, right? So it has an effect on how the page looks, so we're going to leave it. Another thing that kind of went along with the functionality of the form is the submit button. So we're just going to change that to be of type regular button. And so now there's nothing like submitting of the form related. Another thing, well, there's still quite a few. Let's go ahead and kill this hidden entity key. This is just going to be done differently, right? So this is how did we pass things to the back end? We had to have an input in there that was hidden. That was a forms thing. We don't want to do that. The next thing we can do is we put this form like outside of the modal body and modal footer because the submit button was in the footer. That's really no longer the case. Now we can actually move it inside. A trick in Eclipse is you can highlight it, you can hold down Option, and you can kind of hit down arrow. So we can actually move it inside of the modal body. And then the form down here, I'm going to use the same trick, highlight it and hit Option up. And I'm going to move it also inside the modal body. So I can kind of bring those things back a little bit. Looks like I'm fighting myself with 2 tabs and 4 tab rules. Not going to worry about it. All right, so now we've got the form. It is purely inside of the modal body, and it doesn't have its power. It's only here for CSS reasons. Let's go ahead and change some more things here too. The next thing I want to change are the names on the inputs. The name attribute on an input, that's just something that gets sent to the back end. We don't need those, all right? So I'm going to kill my 2 names. That will affect our JavaScript some because we were using that name to find this input, but that's all right. We've got an ID on here, right? We'll just use the ID instead whenever we get to implementing that. So cool. So we still need inputs, right? We're just going to grab the value that's in those inputs. And then the big thing that's going to change is whenever somebody hits the add quote button, we want to dismiss the modal. So I'm going to go ahead and copy down dismiss modal. And the big thing that changes with Ajax is like you're still on the page, so it's your job to dismiss the modal, and it's your job to take an action when they hit add quote. So what we're going to do is we're going to go ahead and add an ID to this button. Just to make sure it's the same in my slides, I'm going to glance in my slides to what I did. I'd called it my insert quote button. That's a pretty good name. And so now whenever I click this button, I'm going to do stuff in JavaScript. I know that I'm going to need an ID on here because I'm going to need a way to get that button and add a click listener to it. Cool, so making good progress. Let's just go ahead and keep going on the HTML front, and let's just go ahead and modify the delete quote just while we're at it. The delete quote is pretty simple. If you remember it, I guess you can go to this version of the page and you can click on delete on one of these. It's really a pretty simple page, so there's really no CSS formatting happening here. And so we can actually just delete this form altogether. So I'm just going to delete it. So no moving it or anything like that, just deleted it. It had a hidden entity key inside of it here. That was for the form post, getting rid of that as well. So overall, looking pretty good. The only thing that needs to change is our delete button. It needs to be just a regular old button. It needs to delete the modal. Sorry, dismiss the modal. Because it's going to have to make the modal go away. And then you're also going to want to take some action on it when you do it. If I called that one my insert quote button, we should probably name this one similar. So just make it a delete quote button. Cool. So what we kind of did there, it was kind of a neat process. It was seeing how is an HTML page different when it's forms plus Jinja versus when it's going to use endpoints. And we can see that we did things like killing the form, including the submit button and all the name attributes on it, killing all the Jinja stuff that was on here. And we went the approach where we just kind of made like a template row. So now we have this row template. And whenever we get new movie quotes, we're going to actually like put in these templates. All right, I think that was actually enough for now. So we did a lot of the HTML stuff. We'll come back next time and we'll start writing some JavaScript. See you then. Bye.